So we have our colonial regions that we know are overseen by England. In the 1700s, England became known as Great Britain. At that time, Great Britain wanted to become a world power. To stay powerful in the 1700s, Great Britain fought France in a war called the French and Indian War. This was not the only war Great Britain was involved in, though. They were involved in multiple battles known as the 7-Year War, the French and Indian War, known as one of those battles. The war took place near the colonies, so the colonists helped Great Britain win the war. Here's part of a video outlining the beginning parts of the French and Indian War.
No sooner had New World dominated than the world's imperial powers were at war on territory, resources, and trade routes. The most significant of these conflicts involving America started in present-day Pennsylvania in 1753, where what began as a squabble between colonial governors turned into World War. Within 2 years, the 7 Years' War involved all of the European powers, with battles for territory at stake in Europe, Africa, India, North America, South America, and the Philippines. The colonists called it the French Indian War, and it permanently shifted the global balance of power. By the mid-18th century, both the British and French wanted to extend their North American colonies into the land west of the Appalachian Mountains, known then as the Ohio Territory. Each side already had fur traders doing business with Native Americans there and pioneers living on the frontier. A group of wealthy English colonists had even formed an investment company to sell farmland in Ohio. The French believed they had exclusive rights to the land since their explorers had been there first. They tried to force the English out by capturing several of their trading posts and destroying an Indian village that supported English traders in 1752. For years, the American colonists had been asking for permission to raise an army and end the French threat once and for all. The king had been suspicious of their motives and denied their requests, but when the French built Fort Duquesne near present-day Pittsburgh, he relented. The Virginia militia, under the command of Major George Washington, was mobilized to ask the French to vacate the Ohio Territory peaceably. They refused, but Washington didn't have a large enough force to overpower Fort Duquesne. Now Colonel Washington returned the following year with more men and proceeded to build his own stockade nearby, called Fort Necessity. The French captured the new fort, and when word reached England, King James declared war. The year was 1756. Though New France had a sparse population, they also had a series of fortifications throughout the territory and formidable Indian allies who were fighting on their behalf. Britain decided that the colonial militia needed more experienced leadership and dispatched General Edward Braddock with an aggressive three-pronged battle plan. En route to his first battle, General Braddock was killed in a surprise attack, and France continued to win victories in the battlefields for 3 years, including the infamous 1757 massacre at Fort William Henry. The residents of the fort had surrendered to the French, but during their retreat as prisoners of war, they were attacked by France's Indian allies. In spite of the French commander's attempt to stop them, the Indians scalped hundreds of British soldiers and carried off another 200 women, children, and servants as slaves. England's only significant early victory in the French and Indian War was capturing a small French outpost that supplied the much larger Fort Louisbourg. England already had control of the surrounding territory known as Acadia, and in order to further isolate Fort Louisbourg, England deported all of their French-speaking residents in the area. Many of these Acadians relocated to Louisiana, where they became known as the Cajuns. England didn't gain the upper hand until 1758. A new battle plan organized by the British Prime Minister called for a significant troop surge, a new strategy that better.
Despite new leadership, British and American tensions were growing. As you can see here, their methods of fighting were very different. The British were known for marching in lines, and having those long red coats were very easy for people to see. That's why General Braddock was able to be defeated so quickly and easily, even before he got to his first battle. As they were marching there, They were seen by the Native Americans and very easy to be taken down. We can also see here finances. If we look down, colonists having resistance to those rising taxes, where the British believe the colonists should be paying for their own defense. The demeanor of the colonists is casual. They're not professionals. They weren't trained, where the British are trained officers with servants and even stop to have tea. In 1757, William Pitt becomes the foreign minister. He understood colonial concerns and offered them a compromise: colonial loyalty and military cooperation for the Britain, and they would reimburse colonial assemblies for their cost. This improved the morale of the colonists greatly. 1758 through 1761, the tide turns for England. It helped that during this time, or it helped by this time that 1761, Spain has become an ally for France. That is a big turning point for us. In 1763, we have the Treaty of Paris. France lost her Canadian possessions, most of her empire in India, and claims to land east of the Mississippi River. Spain got all French lands west of the Mississippi River, New Orleans, but lost Florida to England. England got all French lands in Canada, exclusive rights to the Caribbean slave trade, and commercial dominance in India. North America looks very different at this point. We can see the yellow there being British claims, the green being Spanish claims. There's not a whole lot of French and Russian claims in our continental United States. We can see up near Canada as well as Alaska there are the Russian claims. Let's take a look at the effects of the war. First, on Britain. It increased her colonial empire in the Americas. Remember, Great Britain wanted to become a world empire, a world power. This helped them. It also greatly enlarged their debt. Britain's contempt or hatred for the colonists created bitter feelings, and therefore England felt that a major reorganization of her American empire was necessary. The effects of the American colonists: it united them against a common enemy for the first time. It created a socializing experience for all the colonials who participated. And it also created bitter feelings towards the British that would only intensify. So here we have Great Britain being bitter towards the colonists, and the colonists being bitter right back. Despite the bitterness between the colonists and Great Britain, the colonists were excited to move west. They had just won the Ohio River Valley for Britain, and were excited to be able to move out. It's getting a little crowded in the colonies, and they'd like to see what else is out there. However, Great Britain gives the Proclamation of 1763, which forbade colonists from being able to move west. They could not go past the Appalachian Mountains. Great Britain started at this time as well, or between 1763 and 1765, to tax the colonists. They needed to get out of that big debt that they were in. They owed money and needed to be out of it. It started with one being the Sugar Act in 1764, so anything with sugar is being taxed. The Currency Act in 1764, the Quartering Act in 1765. This gave British soldiers the right to walk up to any colonial house and be allowed to be housed there, so they got one of your rooms, as well as to be fed. So they're taking food off the table as well. We also have the Stamp Act of 1765, so all paper products needed to be stamped and needed to be taxed. The colonists started thinking of why they were being taxed. And over in Great Britain, they had their parliament and had representation for the different places. But the colonists did not have any representation. And so they didn't know how they could be getting taxed when they couldn't say yay or nay to it. And so they really were questioning the ability of Great Britain to tax them when they had absolutely no voice in the matter. the colonists were getting upset about all the taxing. No matter where they turned, they were being taxed. And for the first time, many colonists began calling people who joined the non-importation movement patriots. People that were against Great Britain but were patriotic to what they were becoming. You may be wondering, why didn't the colonists just stop buying the things that are being taxed? Well, the colonists were growing and developing products, but they were being sent back to Great Britain. Great Britain processed them and then sold them to the colonists. And so they weren't able to have any finished products, they just had the raw materials. So if they needed something, it had to be already done, which we'll talk more about the taxes and being able to possibly get products elsewhere. You may also be wondering, well, why didn't the colonists just fight back? Why couldn't they just do what they wanted to do in the colonies? Great Britain is across the ocean. How could they stop them? Well, Great Britain had sent people there to oversee what was happening. And so just like the Quartering Act allowed the soldiers to walk into anyone's house and live there and take food, they also had different government officials living there and overseeing what's happening. And you didn't want to get caught not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So Great Britain had their eyes and their ears all around the colonies, so they saw and heard what was going on. We will see that this perhaps is not the best way for the colonists to be overseen, and perhaps their involvement in the French and Indian War is a precursor to the strength of the colonists. So we'll talk more about that later.